Okay, so where do you report a crime? Sounds simple, right? But what if the people involved are scattered all over the place? Different cities, states, maybe even different countries? Well, that's where things get really interesting. In this explainer, we're going to untangle this fascinating legal puzzle called jurisdiction.
Just think about it. Maybe something happens when you're on vacation, or you're the target of some online offense from someone who knows where. Where do you even start to file a report? Yeah, the answer isn't so clear-cut, and it really boils down to this one super important legal idea. And that big idea is territorial jurisdiction. Basically, it just means that the police or the courts where the crime physically took place are the ones in charge. Sounds pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Well, hold that thought. Because, as we're about to find out, figuring out where a crime actually happens, that can get messy. Really messy.
So to really get our heads around this, let's dive into a real-life story. We're talking about a landmark case from India back in 2008, Niraj Trivedi versus the State of Bihar. Now, on the surface, it's a dispute between a husband and wife, but it ended up becoming this huge test case for the rules of jurisdiction.
At the heart of this case is a very specific law. It's called Section 498A of the Indian Penal Code. Now, this law is all about protecting women from cruelty by their husband or his family. And you'll want to remember that word, cruelty, because how the courts define it is going to be absolutely central to this whole story.
All right, so here's the rundown of what happened. Niraj and Shweta get married in Delhi. Then they move to the USA. But things go south in the marriage. And that's when the wife's father goes to the police and files what's called an FIR. That's kind of the first official step to starting an investigation. But he does it in his hometown of Patna. So let's get this straight. The wedding was in Delhi, the couple lived in the US, but the complaint is filed in a totally different place. And that right there is the core of the problem. You can probably guess what happened next. This whole geographical mess just lit a fire under a huge legal battle. Everything, and I mean everything, came down to this one single question. If there was a crime of cruelty, where did it legally happen?
So, you had two totally opposite stories. On one side, you've got the husband, Niraj Trivedi. He's saying, look, nothing happened in Patna. This is just a tactic to create what he called artificial jurisdiction to make my life difficult. But on the other side, the wife's family argued, no, wait a minute, a demand for money was made in Patna, and that makes this a continuing offense, which means the Patna police absolutely have the right to investigate.
So what does the actual law say? Well, the main rulebook for this stuff in India is the Code of Criminal Procedure, or the CrPC. And Section 177 in that code seems pretty black and white. It says a crime should be handled right where it was committed. So at first glance, it really looked like the law was on the husband's side.
Okay, so with both sides dug in, the Delhi High Court had to make a call. And the decision they made in 2008 wasn't just for this case. It was going to set the standard for a long, long time.
And the judge, Justice Shiv Narayan Dhingra, put it really bluntly in his ruling. He said, and I'm quoting here, "Crime cannot be registered on the basis of residence of the complainant, but only at the place where the crime is committed." I mean, you can't get much clearer than that. It was a very firm, straightforward rule.
Now, this is a really important point. The court made a fine but crucial distinction. They said that the emotional pain the family felt in Patna, well, that was a consequence of the alleged crime. It wasn't the crime itself. And according to the court, jurisdiction has to follow the actual act, not the ripple effects or the emotional fallout.
So, the final verdict? It was decisive. The Delhi High Court said, nope, the Patna Police do not have jurisdiction here. They ordered the whole investigation to be moved from Bihar to Delhi since that's where the couple got married. And for a good while, that was the law of the land on this issue.
But, and this is a big but, here's where the story gets really good. Because in the legal world, nothing is ever truly set in stone. That clear rule from the Niraj Trivedi case, it was about to get a serious challenge.
Because as of today, that is no longer the law.
Fast forward to 2019, a completely different case. This one called Rupali Devi versus the state of Uttar Pradesh makes its way all the way up to the Supreme Court of India. And what they decided would completely flip the script on jurisdiction for these kinds of cases.
And this, right here, is the absolute key takeaway of our entire story. The legal thinking did a complete 180. Remember, under the old Niraj Trivedi rule, you could only file a case where the bad stuff actually physically happened. But then the Supreme Court in the Rupali Devi case came along and said, hold on. They declared that mental cruelty is a continuing offense. It's not something that just stops when a woman walks out the door. It follows her. It stays with her. And because of that, the place where she goes for safety, say her parents' house, that place also has jurisdiction now.
So why is this such a big deal? Well, because this is so much more than just some boring legal detail.
It's a massive shift in how the law thinks, moving away from a rigid, by-the-book rule to an approach that's much more focused on the victim's reality.
Let's talk about what this actually means for people in the real world. For starters, the law now officially recognizes that the harm from mental cruelty doesn't just switch off. It's an ongoing thing. It also gives victims a much more practical way to get help. They can now file a case from a place where they feel safe. This is huge, because it means they can't be forced to go back to a scary or hostile place just to start a legal process. And maybe the biggest point of all, it just goes to show that the law isn't some old, dusty book. It can and does change to keep up with how we understand people in society.
And that really brings us to the big picture here. This whole journey, from the Niraj Trivedi case to the Rupali Devi ruling, shows us how a seemingly simple question, just where, can totally change what justice looks like. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? If the law can evolve this much on one single issue, what other legal rules and boundaries out there are ready for a rethink?